Have you ever given your whole heart to a family only to be told that your presence is too much? That your love, your help, your sacrifices are suddenly unwelcome? This is not just a story of rejection. It is a story of rebirth. And it begins with a woman named Eleanor. Eleanor was 73 when her world unraveled. She stood quietly in the living room of the house she had helped her son and his wife buy. The same house where she had rocked her twin grandchildren to sleep, where she had brought soup during flu season and champagne on anniversaries. It was supposed to be her safe space, her second home. But that day, everything changed. "Why don't you just disappear?" her daughter-in-law Rachel had spat, her voice shaking with frustration. Eleanor's only son, Thomas, stood beside her. He crossed his arms, looked away, and said the words that would echo in Eleanor's mind for weeks. "We'd be better off without you." Silence. That's all Eleanor could offer in response. No angry retort, no tears, just silence and a small nod. She reached for her purse, the same one she had bought with Rachel for a wedding 3 years ago, and left. Outside, spring sunlight filtered through the trees, indifferent to the collapse of Eleanor's world. She drove home in a daze, barely noticing the traffic lights, the pedestrians, the familiar oak tree on Elm Street. Everything felt blurred, distant, surreal. Her Victorian home on Maple Street waited patiently. It had been in the family for generations, a monument to legacy, to love, to loss. She had raised Thomas here after her husband died suddenly of a heart attack. She'd poured her life into this house, and now it was just walls and silence. She moved through the house like a ghost. Photographs lined the hallway: Thomas' graduation, the twins' christening, the wedding she had helped plan. She had once been central to all of it. Now she was on the outside, watching a life that no longer included her. She didn't cry that night. She sat in her reading chair and stared out at the darkened neighborhood. Every window glowed with signs of life: families sharing meals, children playing, parents laughing. In her own house, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock, counting down the minutes of a life no one seemed to need anymore. This wasn't always the story. Once, Eleanor and Thomas were inseparable. After her husband's death, they had become a team. She coached him through every heartbreak, every science project, every baseball tournament. She never missed a game. She never missed a chance to say, "I love you." Then came Rachel, intelligent, driven, fiercely independent. Eleanor tried. She tried so hard. She folded clothes the way Rachel liked. She only visited once a week, down from 3 times. She asked before bringing meals. She held her tongue when she wanted to offer advice. But it was never enough. Her love, once seen as nurturing, became suffocating. Her presence, once cherished, became a burden. It all started with a casserole dish, her grandmother's, painted with delicate blue flowers. Rachel had borrowed it months ago. Eleanor needed it for a church potluck. When she asked about it, Rachel snapped, "You're always keeping tabs, counting what you've given. You suffocate us." Eleanor was stunned. "It's just a casserole dish," she said softly. But it wasn't. Not to Rachel, and as it turned out, not to Thomas either. Later that evening, Thomas came home from work to find Rachel angry and Eleanor quietly seated. When he asked what was going on, Rachel said, "She's mad about a dish." Eleanor tried to explain, to say it wasn't about the dish, but about how she was being made to feel unnecessary, intrusive, unwanted. That's when Thomas looked her in the eye and said, "Mom, we've been meaning to talk to you. You do have a tendency to overstep." A betrayal, not loud, not cruel, just quiet, steady betrayal from the child she had given her life to raise. "We don't need your help," Rachel added. "Not the way you give it, not with strings attached." Eleanor's voice trembled. "There are no strings." Rachel shot back, "Then why do you keep reminding us how much the house is worth? How the Victorians been in your family for generations? It's pressure, it's expectation." Eleanor turned to Thomas. "Is that how you feel too?" He didn't answer right away, but when he did, it broke her. "You need to respect our boundaries," he said. "We're adults now, we're parents, we make our own decisions." And then those words that would become the fault line in her heart: "We'd be better off without you." They had said it together. Her family, her only family, so she left. The days that followed were a fog. She went through the motions, watering plants, attending church, making excuses. Thomas is working on a big project. The twins have swimming lessons. Lies she told with a smile while her heart fractured piece by piece. She walked through the house, touching memories, the pencil marks on the doorframe tracking Thomas' height, the board games in the closet, the sweaters in her late husband's drawer, still hanging as if waiting for him to return. 3 days later, she opened the closet and found her will. The one that named Thomas the sole heir of the Victorian, a home now worth nearly $1 million. She stared at it for a long time. Was this her legacy, a house, an inheritance? A future financial windfall that they were already planning around? Was she just a line in their estate plan? A shift happened then, cold, sharp, irreversible. The next morning, she called her attorney. "Richard," she said, "I want to make some changes." "To the will?" he asked, surprised. "To my life," she replied. They met that afternoon. She told him she wanted to sell the house. Richard was stunned. "You've always been adamant about keeping it in the family." Alina shook her head. "Things change." And they had. That night she stood in the center of her home and said goodbye to the version of herself that had lived here. The mother, the grandmother, the woman who had given everything. She wasn't that woman anymore. Or rather, she wasn't only that woman anymore. She was someone else now, someone who was going to live the rest of her life for herself. This was only the beginning. How do you rebuild a life when the foundation has been ripped away? When the people you love the most show you just how little they value what you've given? For Alina, it began not with rage, but with clarity, a painful, burning clarity that refused to be ignored. She sold the house. The Victorian on Maple Street with its creaking floors and sun-drenched porches, the home that had raised a child and cradled decades of memories, gone. Sold to a developer for cash. No sentimental buyers. No preservation promises. The man had made it clear he planned to tear it down. And strangely, that didn't horrify her. Let them tear it down, she thought. Let something new rise from the ashes. The papers were signed on a Tuesday. Alina handed over the keys with hands steadier than she expected. The closing attorney looked at her with polite surprise. "Most people get emotional when selling a family home," she remarked. Alina smiled. "I did my crying already." The check from the sale was massive, unimaginable. Richard, her attorney, helped her funnel the money into action. "What do you want to do now?" he asked. The question stunned her. What did she want? She had spent so long building her life around others, her late husband, her son, her grandchildren, that she had never considered her own desires. "I want to live," she finally said. So she did. She bought a condo near the ocean. Nothing extravagant, just a small 2-bedroom place with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that kissed the breeze. It was modern, simple, light-filled, the exact opposite of the dark, memory-laden Victorian. She arranged her move with quiet efficiency, 3 weeks to pack. She started with the easy rooms, the guest bathroom, the laundry, the hall closet. Keep, donate, discard. Each decision was an act of liberation. Every discarded item was a piece of her past that no longer served her. Then came the harder rooms. Her late husband's sweaters still smelling faintly of cedar and old love. Folded, donated. Her son's childhood bedroom, now sterile yet echoing with the ghost of laughter. She found his old baseball glove, a stack of handmade Mother's Day cards, a dusty box of trophies. Had she loved too much, or not wisely enough? She didn't know, but she packed it all away, labeling the boxes with care. Family heirlooms, David's childhood, to keep. She created digital photo albums, saved every memory that mattered, and released the rest. Her new condo had no attic, no basement, no room for storing the weight of history. That first night in her new home, she sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the stars blink over the sea. The waves whispered something she hadn't heard in years: freedom. No one called, not Thomas, not Rachel, not the twins. The silence, once unbearable, now felt sacred. She walked the beach in the mornings, barefoot in the surf. Joined a photography class, signed up for sunrise yoga. She didn't tell anyone, she didn't need to. A month passed, still no contact. Then one morning her phone lit up, 21 missed calls, 15 from Thomas, 6 from Rachel. A flurry of voicemails, panicked, breathless. "Mom, please call us." "What have you done?" "We need to talk." She listened to each one, her heart pounding, and then she waited. Not out of cruelty, but because she needed a moment to breathe. To remember she owed them nothing, not anymore. Still, the mother in her couldn't ignore the urgency forever. She called back. Thomas answered on the first ring. "Mom," he said, "what the hell is going on?" "Mrs. Peterson said there's a construction crew at the house." "Your house?" Alina spoke calmly. "Not my house anymore, I sold it." Silence. "You what?" "I sold the house, Thomas." The papers were finalized 3 weeks ago. But that's our inheritance, that's the twins' future, our retirement safety net. Alina laughed not unkindly. You told me to disappear, so I did. You're punishing us, Rachel cut in. This is a punishment. No, Alina said, it's a consequence. They begged for a meeting, she agreed. Coffee, neutral ground. They arrived first, anxious, pale, desperate. Thomas looked her up and down, new haircut, linen pants, blouse the color of ocean mist. She looked like someone he didn't recognize. You look different, he said. I am different, Alina replied. They talked about what had been said, about what had been meant, about love and the difference between giving and giving until you disappear. This isn't revenge, Alina said. This is recovery. You should have talked to us first, Thomas insisted. You could have called, she countered. Rachel tried. The twins miss you. I miss them too, Alina whispered. But you told me I was too much. You treated my love like a weight around your neck. They accused her of being overbearing. She admitted it. They said she made them feel judged. She acknowledged it. And then they sat in silence. I've started living for myself, Alina said at last. For the first time in my life. Rachel's eyes filled. You've really changed. Yes, Alina replied, and I'm not going back. Later, as she walked home, she felt something she hadn't felt in months, peace. Her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Alina's world had shifted, not just physically, not only emotionally, but spiritually. For the first time in decades, she wasn't existing in someone else's orbit. She was her own compass. Her decisions were no longer shaped by guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing those she loved. She had untethered herself. She now woke to the sun piercing through floor-to-ceiling windows, the scent of salt water carried in by the morning breeze. Her calendar, once filled with school pickups, grocery runs, and babysitting requests, now held different entries. Pottery classes on Tuesdays, photography walks on Thursdays, beach yoga at dawn on Sundays. It wasn't glamorous, but it was intentional. The silence in her condo was different. It wasn't absence. It was presence of herself for herself. She explored the coastal town like a curious traveler, a gallery opening here. A garden tour there. She found a second-hand bookstore tucked behind a flower shop and spent hours thumbing through old travelogues and memoirs. She joined a book club. No one there knew she was anyone's mother or grandmother. She was just a leaner, opinionated, witty, and full of untold stories. People started to notice her. A leaner, not someone's mother, not a support role. There was Dr. Alana Patel who walked with her every other morning. You're not what I expected, she said once, admiring Alina's ocean-printed scarf. I'm not what I expected either, Alina replied. There was Michael, the widower from 4A, who brought her leftover lemon tart from his Friday baking sprees. There was Mrs. Levens from the Bridge Group who confessed over iced tea, I moved here after my son stopped inviting me for holidays. At first I thought I'd die from heartbreak, but look, I'm still here. Still here, still living. And one Tuesday morning, Alina sat at the travel agency with a brochure spread in front of her. Alaska, Northern Lights, glaciers, whales, solitude. She bought a ticket. First class. Solo. The woman at the counter raised an eyebrow. You're going alone. Alina smiled. I've been alone for years, I just didn't know it. Before the cruise, she visited her old neighborhood one last time, drove past the house they'd bulldozed. Where her roses had bloomed each spring, a foundation was being poured. Something new would stand there soon. She didn't stop, just looked once. Then kept driving. When the cruise ship pulled away from the dock, Alina stood on the upper deck watching the land recede. She thought of all she had left behind, the guilt, the pressure, the fear of never being enough or worse, of being too much. For 10 days she let the sea carry her. She watched whales breach the surface. She saw glaciers that shimmered like glass in the sun. She stayed up late to chase the northern lights and stood breathless as ribbons of green and purple danced across the sky. She sent postcards to the twins from every port. Bought little wooden toys in Sitka and tiny beaded keychains in Juneau. She didn't hear back. She didn't expect to. On the final night, she sat beside a man who had lost his wife after 40 years of marriage. He was learning to sketch. You're brave, he said, to travel alone. Alina looked out at the midnight blue sea. No, she said, I'm just late. When she returned, tan and radiant, her condo felt even more like home. The shelves now held stones from Alaskan beaches, sketches from fellow travelers, books she'd finished and books she hadn't yet started. She posted the photos online at Rachel's earlier insistence. she had started an Instagram account. Emma and Ethan followed her. "Grandma's cooler than us," Emma told a classmate. One quiet afternoon, her phone rang. "Hi, Mom," Thomas said. "The kids keep asking about your trip. Can we come over for dinner?" They came. The twins ran through the condo, rearranging pillows, declaring the guest room their own. Rachel tried to hide her shock at the seafoam green furniture and abstract paintings. Thomas stood on the balcony, hands in his pockets. "It doesn't feel like you," he said. Alina looked around. "It feels exactly like me, just not the version of me you're used to." After they left, she sat down with her scrapbook. Photos of whales, of glaciers, of strangers who had become friends. She looked at the empty pages waiting for her next adventure. She was becoming someone new, someone braver, someone freer. Someone who had learned, finally, that love is not about sacrifice without end, that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that you are allowed to exist beyond your role in someone else's life. A quiet revolution was happening inside Alina. It didn't come with fanfare or applause. It came with small decisions, a refusal to apologize for joy, a conscious step into unknown spaces, a commitment to say yes to herself. Weeks after returning from Alaska, Alina found herself busier than ever, not with obligations but with experiences. Her days were hers, her evenings filled with music, learning, laughter. She was no longer a supporting character in someone else's story. She was the author of her own. She registered for watercolor classes. Her hands, once so accustomed to folding laundry and stirring soup, now held brushes that painted sea cliffs and forest skies. She wasn't good at first, but she was captivated, the freedom of color, the lack of rules. It reminded her that perfection was never the point. Presence was. One morning, while arranging shells collected from a sunrise walk, she got a call from Thomas. "We've been talking about taking the twins to Europe next summer," he said. "Would you consider joining us as our guide?" It wasn't just a vacation invite, it was an olive branch, a recognition. A sign that perhaps they were beginning to see her not just as a function but as a person. "I'd like that," she replied, "for part of it." Part? They should have their own family time too. "You don't need me there every step." The old Alina might have insisted, might have arranged the entire itinerary, packed emergency snacks, booked backup hotels. But the new Alina knew involvement didn't always mean intimacy. And sometimes, stepping back created space for better connection. Sunday dinners resumed, but on her terms. Every other week they met at her condo. The view was always a topic. Rachel still couldn't believe how bright the walls were, how modern the furnishings. "It's not what I expected," she said once. "It's what I never allowed myself before," Alina replied. The twins adjusted easily. Children do. They brought her seashells from their own beach walks, drew pictures of her ship from Alaska. They started calling her Explorer Grandma. With Rachel, things were slower, tentative, but real. Over tea one evening, Rachel confessed, "I used to feel judged by you. Like I was always failing some invisible test." Alina sipped her drink. "That was never my intention, but I hear you. It made me defensive, made me shut you out." "We both made mistakes," Alina said, "but we're still here. Still trying." Rachel looked out the window. "I've started painting too, just small watercolors, something that's mine." "That's beautiful. It feels like breathing again." Those moments, the quiet exchanges, the honest words, were worth more than any inheritance. Of course, there were setbacks. One afternoon, when Alina declined to babysit so she could attend a photography retreat, Thomas had frowned. "You used to drop everything for us." "I used to forget I had a life," she answered. "Not anymore." He didn't reply, but he didn't argue either. Boundaries, she was learning, were a kind of love too. She and Thomas talked more, deeper, without needing a crisis to bring them together. Once, while helping her fold sweaters before her upcoming trip to Europe, he paused. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Is that weird to say?" Alina laughed a little, "But I'll take it." He helped her pack, he hugged her longer than usual. The twins made her a scrapbook. "So you can show us everything when you come back," Emma explained. They didn't say if, they said when. That mattered. Her next trip was a whirlwind: Paris, Rome, Barcelona. She strolled the cobblestones alone, stood in art museums for hours, drank wine by the Seine, scribbled thoughts in a journal at the edge of the Colosseum. In Paris, a young artist drew her portrait. "You have eyes like someone who's seen too much," he said. "Or maybe just enough," Alina replied. She sent postcards home. photographed fountains and street musicians, collected moments instead of expectations. Somewhere between the steps of Montmartre and the cliffs of Cinque Terre, she realized something vital. She hadn't just survived the fracture of her family. She had expanded beyond it. She wasn't defined by whether her son called, or whether her daughter-in-law approved, or whether her grandchildren remembered to say thank you. She was defined by her own heartbeat, her own hope, her own hunger for life. At a cafe in Florence, her phone buzzed. A video message from the twins. "Grandma, we saw your gondola pic, so cool, we miss you." She smiled, heart full. She responded, "I miss you too, see you soon," with stories to tell. Eleanor stood at the balcony of her condo, suitcase still packed at her feet, watching the sea shimmer beneath the morning sun. 2 months in Europe had passed like a dream, yet something within her had changed with permanence. What began as escape had become embodiment. She had not merely visited other countries. She had visited herself, parts long buried, parts never known. She was no longer the woman who flinched at silence or chased validation from people who viewed her love as obligation. She was now a woman who knew her worth regardless of whether anyone else recognized it. As she unpacked, she smiled at the souvenirs the twins had helped her choose spots for in their scrapbook. She placed a small Eiffel Tower replica next to their paper sea turtle from the cruise. Across the pages were memories not just of places, but of independence, curiosity, and courage. That weekend, Thomas and Rachel brought the twins over. They ran in excitedly, dumping bags of craft supplies and photographs. "We made you a banner," Ethan exclaimed, holding up letters that spelled "Welcome home, Grandma the Explorer." Later, while washing dishes, Thomas said, "It's good to have you back." "I'm glad to be back," Eleanor replied. "But I won't be staying still." "I figured," he chuckled, "your next trip. South America, then maybe Morocco. You've become a different person." "No," she said, drying a plate, "I've become myself." Rachel entered the kitchen. "I've been thinking about what you said before, about boundaries, identity. I think I lost myself for a while in all the roles: wife, mother, daughter-in-law." "We all do," Eleanor said, "but we can find our way back." Rachel hesitated. "Do you think we can start again?" Eleanor met her eyes. "I think we already have." The family rhythm was different now, less about performance, more about presence. Eleanor babysat once a week, Wednesdays only, her choice. Sunday dinners rotated. She no longer offered advice unless asked. Rachel asked more. Thomas called just to chat. The twins began leaving voice notes about their days unprompted, but not everything was smooth. Old habits flared: missed birthdays, miscommunications, assumptions. One tense phone call came after Eleanor extended a trip unexpectedly. Another when she declined hosting Thanksgiving. Each time there was friction, but no fracture. They talked, they learned, they adjusted. "You used to avoid conflict at all costs," Thomas said once. "And I lost myself doing it," Eleanor replied. He nodded. "It's better this way, harder, but better." On the eve of her next departure, he helped her zip her suitcase. "When you first left, I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid we'd lost you forever." "You lost the version of me that lived only for you," she said gently. "But this version, she's not going anywhere, even when she travels." The night before her flight, she sat with the twins on the couch. They flipped through the new scrapbook they had begun. Pages for Brazil, pages for Peru. Ethan pointed to a blank space. "What will go here?" "We'll see," Eleanor smiled. Emma looked up. "Are you coming back again?" "Always," Eleanor whispered. "Not always here, not always the same, but always coming back." From a cafe in Rio weeks later, she video called during dinner. The twins waved wildly. Rachel smiled. Thomas leaned into the frame. "Mom, you look happy." "I am." He hesitated. "Because of everything." "Yes, because of everything." As the call ended, Eleanor stared at her reflection in the laptop screen. Silver hair caught in the sun. Eyes tired but alive. This was what becoming visible looked like. She ordered another espresso and began journaling. She wrote of thresholds crossed and truths faced. Of the moment she realized love without respect is not love, and sacrifice without limit is not virtue. Of how disappearing had made her seen not by others but by herself. She had become a woman who could leave without explanation and return without apology. She wrote, "To live fully is not selfish. It is sacred."